Okay, welcome to our May 11th, 5:30 budget meeting, and I'm going to turn it over to Town Manager Hazen Blodgett to go over the 2021 budget proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the board. It's a great honor to present the budget to you guys. Just a little bit of housekeeping. This is going to be kind of a general overview for the board. We'll share both the presentation and a line item budget with the board right after this meeting or presentation. Happy to have any discussion, questions. I'll do the best I can. We'll have the department heads available too. If we can't answer your questions or it's going to take research, obviously we'll get back to you. There is a budget work session planned for next Monday night at 6 p.m. That's May 18th. And then the public hearing is scheduled for May 26th at 7 p.m. So with that, I'll begin the presentation. We've got a beautiful picture of Town Hall. Looks like it's in winter before the crepe myrtles are blooming or whatever, leafing. So just a recap of the current budget that we are under and will continue until June 30th. Our current tax rate is 28 cents per $100 valuation. Our fund balance exceeded 34%. In the fiscal year 20 budget, we did not appropriate any fund balance. If you'll recall, we budgeted 4 new positions in the police department and then fully funded the fire and EMS 24-hour staffing model. What are some of the constraints that are hamstringing us this year? As everybody knows, we're in the middle of a pandemic that's impacted our forecast for vehicle and sales tax revenue, state allocated funding, investment earnings, and revenues from meals and lodging, which we also call our prepared food and hotel motel tax. What we've done in this is to absorb the increased costs and the revenue losses while continuing to provide a high quality level of services, which we definitely think the citizens have come to expect and receive too. In this budget, we are not proposing a tax increase. And in this budget, we are proposing a one-time fund balance appropriation of $236,000 to balance the budget. So besides the pandemic, what are some of the headwinds that are blowing against this budget? One of them is an increase in percentage to the state retirement system, which we are a part of. All our employees are. That's $175,000 increase in state health insurance. That's about $71,000. It's about a 6%. But I will say, before we got on the state's insurance, it was a terrible situation. So much better being part of the state system. Whatever the percents are, much more predictable than what we had as a small employer. Increases in workers' comp and property liability. We're estimating $80,000. We are still waiting on rates, and we'll see increases to solid waste fees, $60,000. That may look like a big number, but that's about a 3% CPI, Consumer Price Index, and it's about a $2 million cost. So that's a big ticket item for us. And then if you look at base salary increases and fully funding positions, it's about $380,000. So there's $750,000 of increased costs that we are experiencing. So here's a brief history of our tax rate. What's interesting, I guess, about that, as you can see, in 2011, from 2011 to 12, we had a revaluation. That's why it was dropped about 10%. The wackiness in there, though, was then we had another revaluation, and if anybody recalls that, we ended up refunding about $1 million, over $1 million in property taxes because the original property valuations were off. So I think it hampered us kind of coming out of a recession and building a fund balance. And then you can see in 16, 17, and 18, we're at 34%. And then we raised taxes $0.015 in fiscal year 19. And then we had the revaluation in 20, and it went back down to 28. And we're proposing 28 for the fiscal year 21, which would begin July 1st. Our budget, general fund budget, is about 3% lower than last year's general fund budget. But there is an explanation. I mean, it's just not as simple as that, because one of the items is we're doing less paving. One of the things we did in this year's budget is we did a great deal of paving this year. We're in the midst of it, by the way, and we're spending down all the fund balance associated with Powellville and fund balance related to paving. So where's our money come from? We're talking about 59% of our revenue is property tax, which is a very stable tax, by the way. Sales tax is 14%. State shared revenue is 9%, and then other fees and taxes are about 18%. Powellville is what we get for paving and maintaining our roads in town. We are proposing a 3% employee merit pool increase. We are recommending a reclassification of positions in the police department to implement not totally, but partially implement a stratified policing model. This is very, very important to the chief. And then we are also recommending an advanced certification program for the fire department. It's a small department. Chief Kinneberg feels strongly we got to figure out a way to incent people to stay here. And as the mayor and I learned today, as we understand it, or I understand it, the average firefighter in Charlotte makes $76,000 a year. That is hard to compete against, and we have to be ever vigilant and try to offer as many incentives as we can to keep our guys. I do think what y'all did with the $3 an hour was smart and a good way to build goodwill. We also, just on a side note, I guess this was mayor to mayor, but the mayor was told that the average police officer makes $86,000 in Charlotte. Now, I don't know if that includes spring. I don't know, but that is a big number.
That's a big number.
Yes, sir. Oh, and the other one we're excited about is an expanded EAP program for first responders, which EAP stands for Employee Assistance Program. We're excited about this. Tanya, our HR director, brought this to our attention. I think Becky and I are both excited. This is a good thing to do for our employees, particularly for our first responders and the stress we're under. We can kind of get into that as we go through this. Okay, so regarding the different departments. So the first one is the governing board. There is a change here. I wanted to bring it to the board's attention. In this budget, I am proposing a raise for the commissioners, not the mayor, but the commissioners. Currently, the commissioners make $5,200 a year. I'm proposing to go to $7,000 a year. When we did the study, I think kind of the typical average number for folks, elected officials in our area is about 8. But there's a trade-off here, because right now you guys get, for your term, you guys get a $3,600 per term technology allowance. So really the idea is just to trade the technology allowance for salary. So the salary would go up $1,800 a year for the 6 commissioners, and the per term technology allowance would go away. You guys may want to talk about that. Doesn't have to be talked about now, but that's.
Question about that?
Sure.
There's a taxes difference on the two, right? Do I understand that correctly?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Could you explain?
Yeah, I don't know what those are.
it is more favorable to the commissioners to have a technology allowance and not have their salary increase from a tax perspective.
Also, we're now funding, we're paying for the funding of live streaming town board meetings. And then the citizen survey has been delayed from this fiscal year till next fiscal year. And of course, we're doing that with help from Western Carolina University. Okay, the town manager's budget. We are continuing with funding the monthly digital newsletter. That costs about $13,000 a year. It's not cheap. Commissioner, I think Miller brought it up last year, but it is a way to reach out and touch our folks. We send it out monthly. We're also showing money for Love Matthews. I think Becky really was kind of the mover and shaker behind that. Very popular. That big M is somewhere hidden, but we got a lot of positive accolades. We want to continue that. Really wasn't that expensive, and then we do want to do continue the training of staff. HR, as I mentioned, this is where our health insurance premiums reside. It's a 6% increase. We're including $19,000 for an EAP program to help first responders. Right now, it's more of a, it's like free for the first hour and a half or hour. It's a very minimal program. Under this program, we really offer police and fire the opportunity to get real, genuine counseling free instead of this kind of cursory, how's it going? Okay, everything's fine. And, everybody parts ways. When we think if we can give folks the opportunity to really sit down, take their time, and open up and make sure they understand we're here to help them. We have decreased the funding for employee training and development. It was necessary to help balance the budget. Also, HR, which is only a two-person department, or 2.5 people, but requested help with the information management system, which is a great idea. It's a great way to be more efficient. It's simply this year's budget just was not the year. The COVID really tore into the budget, and we just went back really to a bare bones budget. Finance, we continue to do the GFOA is the Governmental Finance Officers Association. We've been awarded that award of excellence for 21 years. The 2019 audit, which was the last one we had 45% total fund balance and 30% was unassigned. You are seeing the county is passing along some vehicle tax billing increases, and our banking fees are going up too. We aren't going to go out for bid this year on banking services. It's really healthy to do this probably once every 3 to 5 years just to test the market. And so we'll plan on doing that next fiscal year. Technology, we are going to continue the training for malware and cybersecurity attacks. I think we did learn within the last couple of weeks that somebody tried to attack, I think with the Charlotte EOC. The bad guys really think this is an opportunity, probably looking at what's going on in the United States. So we got to continue that. I hope everybody's done the latest. I've encouraged Wayne to try to trick us. That's his job, is to really fool us, because I think it's going to make us better and more vigilant. Also, we can err in this year's budget phone and internet service. So we're having to the tune of, we didn't budget or forgot to budget $38,000, so we're having to do that. And then we do have a fiber optic line that we installed to the telecommunications tower over there at the police department, which makes it safer and a better connection, as opposed to I think it was cell to cell kind of connection before.
Hazen, I've got a question. I didn't see the line item for the cyber attack training. How much does that cost?
Let me see if I can find that.
I was just curious.
It's about $4,000, Hazen.
Okay, good. Thanks, Becky.
Sure.
It's a good program.
Well, for $4,000, I agree.
Yeah.
And I would ask, please do that. You know, every time we do that, don't, you know, the rule of thumb is do not open attachments. If you're concerned about it, don't tap on the link, and don't open the attachments. You can read it, and as soon as whatever the bells go off, that's all you got to do. You don't need to go any further, and you'll be fine. And then you can always send an email to Wayne or Becky or myself, and we'll hunt it down. It's not a problem. All right, risk management. We are seeing, as I already mentioned, some increases to workers' comp and property casualty insurance. We should get those quotes back in next week or two. Okay, under police, again, I mentioned the stratified policing model. Next week, the chief will have a big opportunity to really talk about this, but really, I think it's an accountability model that he wants to make sure we put in place so that everybody knows, you know, you're accountable for this. If you can't handle it or it becomes too big, it's going to get bumped up. We're going to use data to make sure, you know, it's driven by data. We do have a person on board. That's her job, is to, so we can focus on hotspots and nuisances, make sure we're doing it right. We're proposing 7 new vehicles as part of the routine fleet replacement. We originally had more than that. We cut out 2 cars. We're including an upgrade for in-car video cameras with GPS and recording system, and under this new program, which isn't that expensive, the cameras automatically come on. Nobody has to push a button or anything like that. Becky, is that correct? Or Clark, is that correct? Silent.
Yes, that's a part of it. Yes, sir.
Okay. Is there anything you want to add, Clark?
In reference to the in-car video camera system, this new system, one, its cost advantages are there, and secondarily, we are using an antiquated system that currently burns video to a DVD through a robot that's located inside the police department, which routinely fails because it is such an antiquated system. This new system will allow us not only to do it via a cloud system, but it also allows us to GPS track the officers and then put a geofence around a location once we have a call for service, and be able to pull all of that video into one real-time review process. It also allows our dispatch center and commanders to go live on a car. If the operator of that vehicle is not answering their radio, we can actually activate their camera, where our old is so antiquated that it does not.
We are proposing to eliminate a vacant telecommunicators position. And what didn't make the cut in the budget was a crime scene technician. Right now we're using Charlotte CMPD, and in one of our incidences, we had to wait 4 hours for them to get on scene, which did seem like a waste of our own resources. But again, we just couldn't find the dollars to fund that contract position. Also, when you guys see a line item budget, you'll see the Office of the Chief, a significant increase in the Office of the Chief. But if you'll look closer, you'll see, well, we've put all the fuel in there, some of the software, radio costs, laundry costs. So we've consolidated some of the costs. It's not whatever padding or any kind of fluff in the budget. All right, fire and EMS. In talking to Chief Kinneberg, this advanced fire and rescue certification, we're such a small department, it's very hard for folks to advance. We don't have many layers, which you could say we're lean, obviously, which is a good thing. But here's an opportunity for relatively a little bit of money to our guys to get advanced training. It's a national certification. And then there'd be a financial reward with a chief, or incentivizing them to get these higher professional certifications. One of the things I did have, yeah. Okay, so one of the things I did have to do, which was a little bit painful, is the second bullet there deals with Idlewild Volunteer Fire Department. So for the last 5 years, we've paid for half or a little bit less than half of a fire truck out at Idlewild. Well, it got paid off this year, in this fiscal year. We finished paying them the money. And this was before the pandemic came into being, well, really became into being. They asked that the $40,000 be rolled into their operating budget. That did make sense to me at the time. We need them. They provide 4 people. However, as part of our cost program, after we got into this, I felt like we couldn't afford to give this to them in operation. And I did call Jay Alexander, who's the president of Idlewild, and say, Jay, I just want you to know, because I did tell him we would have it in the budget, that it won't be there. So, of course, he was very disappointed, and he said he was going to reach out to y'all, so y'all may hear from them. We also, Chief Kinneberg did ask for a partial funding for a deputy chief, and that did not make it into the fire and EMS budget. The other thing I would say about the budget that's, I think, a flaw, something if we had more money that we would correct. So we rely on what we call volunteers. If you look at, name a department, Indian Trail or Stallings or Henby Bridge, some of these surrounding departments, they're paying their volunteer firefighters between $12, $14, $15 an hour. What we do is we pay them $100 a shift. So, they do get good training from us, but they are not, ideally, we would pay them, $13, $14, $15 an hour to be competitive with the market. But it's a great example of an item that had to be cut out of the budget because we simply could not afford it this year.
Hazen,
Yes, sir.
I suggest we call an employee that's making that much money not a volunteer.
Yeah, it's paid part-time is a better word.
It's not a volunteer. When you're making $15 an hour, that's not a volunteer.
Well, and we don't pay anybody $15.
I know, but I'm just saying what they're doing in Mint Hill or whatever.
Yeah, great use of the proper term. Okay, Public Works. So we did increase. So historically, we budget about $700,000 a year in road resurfacing. Now, for the last couple of years, if you looked at old budgets, the numbers were higher than that because we were using money we hadn't spent in the previous year. So this year, there's by our standards, a very big paving program going on, but we're going to spend all that money down. So in this budget, it does show an increase of $100,000 to $800,000 over previous years. However, at the planning conference, we should be at $1.25 million a year to keep that line steady, and we are not meeting that. I think this is a great example of, if we had another $300,000 or $400,000 a year, that's one of the things we'd recommend putting it to. I do think someday we need to talk about, because we have $5 more. Right now, people in Matthews pay $25 for their car, each of their cars. That rate, every $5 raises about $125,000. At some point, I think the board should consider that, and we put it all in the paving, and we make that part of the budget, and that would get you up to, in this case, about $925,000. Still not what we need, but it's progress. So 2 other things I want to mention about Public Works. One of them is under facilities maintenance, that Albert Pierre, he really needs a 3rd person, but it did not make it in the budget. Years going forward, I can see us needing that. In stormwater, we are proposing $63,000 for a new vehicle. It's a 550 flatbed. And talking to CJ, this may be an example of something we could wait and hold off a year. Just know that stormwater is not general fund money. So if we cut that out, let's say we cut it out, it doesn't free up money in the general fund. All it would do is go back to the stormwater fund balance. So, if you look on your water bill, you pay water, sewer, and a stormwater fee. And that stormwater fee is what pays for this stormwater department.
What kind of vehicle is it, Hazen?
It's a 550. It's a big flatbed truck.
Okay.
Okay, so the next item is solid waste. It is, you can see the numbers. That's $1.9 million. And it's an increase of $60,000, which is a lot of money for us. On a percent basis, it's about 3%, which, the contract says they increase it by the consumer price index for, I think, southeast cities, metropolitan areas.
Can't hear you, Hazen.
So that $60,000 is tied to the consumer price index, and it's in the contract, and it's just over 3%.
And when is Republic's contract up?
In June of 23.
Okay.
We signed a 7-year contract with them in 2016.
What about fuel surcharges, Hazen? We're not paying any of those, are we?
No, sir. Nope. Okay. In planning, that is a status quo budget. Certainly 100% status quo. There's really nothing to lift up. Economic development, there are some changes here. So we are not recommending the $20,000 for Red Brick Partnerships. They recognized this and made this request to forego for fiscal year 21. And then we are eliminating the EDACT wanted to do or does an event. We are eliminating that. We are keeping a little bit of money in the facade grant program. That's enough for two facades. If two facades came forward and a third one came, you could always appropriate more funds, $2,500 for that additional facade grants, for instance. Okay, Parks and Recreation. So we've made an assumption for Parks and Recreation, both on the expenditure side and the revenue side, that as of July 1st, they will be running 100%, both on the revenue side and on the expenditure side. So we're recommending additional playground equipment, a swing for Rice Road Park. There are we're proposing 2 beach fests next year, one in October that we've already started to publicize, and then, of course, the typical one in May. We are not proposing any improvements to the community center. And originally they wanted to add another event. The events are so popular and we do such a good job. And I think that is kind of really a central part of our brand, is these events that we do. But we decided not to try to do one in fiscal year 21.
Hazen, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Have we line itemed any public art or murals yet in this new budget?
We have not, but we're always willing to do that. I think we can add that'd be easy to add to the budget. Those things aren't that expensive, and we pay out of tourism funds.
Okay, I just I want to pursue that. It might only be $2,000 to $8,000, but I like the new item on tonight's agenda for the community center walkway between that and the ag building. That's beautiful.
Good. All right, here's some of the other things we're talking about in the budget. Normally, the Levine Senior Center gets $5,000. We've been giving $5,000 for years now. Next year, we're proposing $1,500. And the reason for the numbers lower is because we advanced the other $3,500 to them to help them go to the LED lighting. And this was all part of the agreement when we approved it. Tourism grants, we're showing it's $77,000. Last year, that was $83,000. And recently the board said, well, let's give 5% of the previous year's total for the food and beverage hotel motel tax. And that number is going down significantly. So that's why the reduction. I wanted to make the board aware, people scramble for that money, that 83,000 or the 77. So it's making it $6,000 more competitive this year than it was, or next year than it is this year. We did budget $50,000 for facilities maintenance and repairs. There are some big ticket items out there that do need to be addressed. All our buildings, we went through a big building spree, probably around 2000. This building, Town Hall, was built in 2001, and we do need to continue to build up that fund. Arts and Science Council, we're showing it $25,000. I know they are hurting because that quarter cent tax didn't. Matthew's alive. That's a relatively long-standing relationship. Same thing with Matthew's Historical Foundation. And then we have a tourism agreement with the chamber to host the visitor center over there at the depot.
Hazen, didn't Matthews Alive ask for additional money?
So what they asked for, they wanted less to contribute a lower percent of Leanne Moore's salary. So the agreement was 40%. However, it's not, from a written document or contract standpoint, it's not as clear as could have been or should have been, but it has been the standard. 40% has been the standard since we hired a special events coordinator. And I'm recommending we continue that at 40%. All right. So the CIP, we did, there has been reductions in the CIP in order to help balance the budget. We are showing $106,000 for public safety enhancements. So the one I think about the most is hardening the police department, right? I mean, the police department was a shell building. It was never designed as a police department. And we've made some improvements, but we continue to need to harden that structure, for safety. We did get a CDBG, which stands for Community Development Block Grant Funds, for the design of part of Ames Street. That's a $100,000 grant. And so we are chipping in $12,300. Our AEDs are probably in the neighborhood of 16 or 17 years old. We're continue to replacing those at $15,000 a year. We are proposing cameras downtown to some cities have done a great job with cameras, and we'd like to do that as well. And then there's money for the Sam Newell Road multi-use path. Crestdale Road multi-use path, we got $250,000 in state funding, and then our estimate for that work is $330,000, and we would put $80,000 in recreation fees in lieu of to that. The other thing is it's not in the budget, but we would like to probably in January talk about ordering a new rescue truck that is probably 22 years old. Those things take like 6 months to build, so we wouldn't have to fund it until fiscal year 22. right. Let's see. We do have some debt payment for Uten Pottery. That's about $55,000 a year to the county. The county fronted that. We're paying them back. And then the community center roof repairs, the downtown. That's the decorative street lights that you should see come quickly soon. And then the paving of Matthews Station Street is. We've signed the contract, and then what we'll do is buy a piece of equipment for Fullwood Theater, and that will actually act as the collateral to get this loan, and that's on tonight's agenda. And then we are showing $135,000 towards the Matthews downtown loop, and that segment is along Matthews Mint Hill Road.
Downtown loop is a greenway?
Yes, sir. Or what they call it is a
Multi-use path.
Well, now they got another word. It's a side path, but it's the multi-use path. Greenway's down in the whatever along the creek. This is a multi-use path.
Okay.
All right, I've given you guys a whole bunch of information. What can we do to answer any questions or?
I have one question, Hazen. On the library, what is the status of the cost-sharing maintenance of the library? We voted on option 3 at $3 to be decided upon. Have we negotiated or talked to them about that, and what is their reaction, please?
Yeah, so I am working with someone there at the library, and I proposed $3 a square foot. I said, to me, that's the industry standard. He at first wanted to break everything down, and I suggested, look, can't we just go at $3 a square foot? And he said he was going to look at that. I have not heard back from him. I did put in to him, I put out, like, just know we need to get recouped for the roof. We put in a roof that cost $100,000. The pillars cost $80,000. All that wrought iron cost $60,000. And we want to get reimbursed a prorated share for all that stuff, including the paving. And he understands all that is on the table. I just have not heard back from him. And let me just say one other thing. Also, he understands we want to go forward, like replacing the windows. These windows are 20 years old. Going forward, setting up a fund so they pay a prorated share for the maintenance of this building going forward as well.
Oh, this needs to be paid in arrears at this point.
That's correct. So the way I kind of pitched it to him is, let me see what the number is. So by our calculations, they owe us $188,000 on improvements we've already made. I think it's fair, and I told him this. I said, look, if you guys want to pay us back over 5 years or 3 years, in other words, how can you make it more digestible from a budgeting standpoint? I don't mind. I just want to be fair to the town. And then he seemed to understand that. And so, I expect to hear back from him shortly.
Hazen, who was this gentleman, or what was his title?
He's in charge of their real estate. I can't remember the name. It's Daniel. Maybe Daniels is his last name. But okay. It's David Dillard.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions for Hazen on the budget?
I have one. Hazen, what's the 3% MERT pool come out to?
How much does it cost?
Yes.
So The merit itself is about 300 and, before I talk.
Is that the 381K?
Yes, $381,000. So let me talk about that. I'm not sure how much heartburn that's giving you guys. The managers do kind of get together and they'll say, what are you thinking about raises, blah, blah, blah. And, I always take what the managers say with a little bit of a grain of salt, because just because you're proposing it doesn't mean the board's going to go for it. But we were on the low, the 3% was on the low end compared to the other towns. I know the mayors recently had a conversation, which, they're going to speak, like, oh yeah, we've heard the manager's proposal, but guess what? We're not going that route or whatever. But it sounded like the mayors, there was consensus among the mayors to go. And I would say that 3% is on the low end of what's happening throughout the county, maybe with the exception of Davidson, which is talking about a 6-month delay.
Well, that was kind of my conversation. My thought process is one, I'm not sure it's a great optic. A lot of businesses have furloughed employees. We have held the line on any increases or bonuses for this year. I think the general nation is sort of in that mode. So I wouldn't have a problem in relooking at it 6 months down the road. But right now, I think it's a very foolish optic to pay our employees more money, talk about pay raises. And it kind of goes to point number 2 here. I don't think a commissioner should be taking an increase either. This is a dire situation, and I think everybody needs to share a little bit in the haircut that's taking place right now. My opinion.
So a couple thoughts there. So it sounds like Huntersville is going to end up with a 4% increase. Cornelius is 3%. Pineville is a 3% merit and a 2% COLA. Mint Hill is between a 3 and a 4% COLA and a 2.5% merit. So, we've talked a lot about how competitive are we going to be against our competitors. And then the other thing while private sector has worked from home, 70% of our employees are police and fire. So while everybody else is rushing one way, our guys are rushing the other way. And it is, I get the national economy, but it's true that, 70% of our employees are working very hard, and they've been rewarded, by the way, from the board, right? They're special pay, and then a vast majority of our other employees are working from home. So we're getting a lot of productivity. That's what I want to say.
Hazen, I look at it different from John Urban looking at it. And I know that the people who we're talking about are those front line, the police, the fire, EMS, and I'm concurring 3% raise for them. I think it's fair in this time that we're going through now. And also it's thought about increasing for the commissioners. We've been well underpaid for a long time, and I mean 18%, $1,800 more dollars onto our salary is not going to affect us. And I know this board this year has worked super overtime for what, and if you break it down by dollar cent, we're not making minimum wages. Not that we took this job to make that money, but at the same time, we ought to be compensating for the times and the decision that we are making now going through this crisis. I am concurring in the favor of the 3% raise and taking care of the commissioners as well too. Certainly, we deserve it and they deserve it. That's my 2 cents.
Let me just say that I had some of the same concerns that Commissioner Urban had initially, until I thought I saw what all of our sister cities in Mecklenburg County are proposing, and we're actually very much on the low end. I wouldn't want to go so low that we started losing employees to neighboring towns. So I was actually kind of shocked. I had a conversation with Hazen earlier today. I'm like, I'm not sure where their budgets are finding this money. Mint Hill, 3.5 to 4.5 COLA and another 2.5% merit is proposed. So some of our nearby towns are proposing pretty significant increases. It is an odd time. I'm sure everybody on this call knows people that have had have lost their jobs or have had their pay significantly reduced during these times. So it's a tough call.
And also, just because they're being proposed, as Hazen said, is not necessarily approved. So
this is true, but this is coming from the mayors and not the managers. So a couple of them seemed pretty certain that 3% was going to stick. I forewarned Hazen that this was probably going to be a discussion point in this budget. Anybody else have any thoughts on it? Or any other questions for any other portion of the budget?
Hayes, I have one, please. Hazen, if we could do a graph of what we have spent on police and separately fire over the last, let's say, 5 or 6 years. I believe it's been on the rise significantly, and that's not a criticism, but it's something that I would like to look at and review. Some of it is due to the growth and needs, but I just want to make sure that we keep it in check. So I would just ask what the budget was for police and also for fire over the last, say, 6 years on a tracking graph of some form. So for a discussion point.
Okay, we're happy to do that. And I think what would be smart is to show the corresponding changes. Like if, it's X, well, what happened? What'd you get for your X? Just like 1 year we added 10 people in fire, right? So we can do that. That won't be a problem at all.
Thank you.
And also keep in mind too, Jeff, back 4 years ago, our police department out of the surrounding areas was somewhere around the bottom of the total pole. And we increased it to bring them up. We were trying to get them in the top 2 or 3. And I think we did land maybe in the 4th place and bringing our department up. But, our town is growing, so our police department is growing. And also keep in mind too, Jeff, that our fire department was not fully manned, and we did man that, of course, and we need that. We need that because we're still not covered on my side of the town up here on 51. There's no coverage on this area here, and that disturbs me immensely. But at the same time, all of the growth that we have put in place for the fire, EMS, and for the police department was well deserved to bring them up so that they could be competitive with other surrounding towns, so that we wouldn't lose them.
Okay, thank you.
To pick up on what Hazen said at the top of the meeting, this is from Mayor Lyles in Charlotte. She said the Charlotte recommendation is 3% for general fund and hourly employees, but police officers and firefighters have a step plan. A police officer's salary will be $86K and firefighter 2, $76,000.
God almighty.
It's pretty tough to compete against that.
Yeah.
So they I guess their police and fire don't get the normal merit increase. They're on a step plan where I don't know if they have guaranteed levels that they reach or what, but yeah, it's an interesting conversation. I understand the optics, but we also don't want to fall again much below our nearby towns, or we're going to lose some employees.
True.
Hazen, I think now's the time for the dance or something. Let's, get a little.
Well, and just know, so what we're going to share with y'all is the presentation. We'll share the line item budget, and I guess we'll have to do it remotely again next week. This is different. I think it's harder, you know, when we're in the room, the Jordan room, around the table, it's easy to have a casual conversation and ask questions. This is a little more formal, a little more difficult for everybody. I do want to, before we stop, I do want to thank Becky Hawk. She worked very hard. Beth worked very hard. Maureen worked very hard. All the department heads worked very hard to prepare this budget. They knew early on, things changed. Really, things changed from 45 days. Really, it's really just been totally unique how things have changed in the last 45 days. And, you know, at the planning conference, we were talking about a bond referendum. Nobody's talking about a bond referendum, you know. So it's changed.
You know, I was in a smaller meeting with some folks, and Charlie Buckley, our town attorney, made the comment, and I have to agree with him, that this is actually if you think about how much revenue we're losing, to only be dipping into the general fund for a couple $100,000 and having a balanced budget with no tax increase is pretty amazing, really.
Yeah, it is.
My hat's off to staff for. I know we always want to trim a little more fat here and there, and we need to dive into the numbers in great detail, but very important, I think, to just about all of the elected leaders that we not raise taxes this year. We've done it for the last 2 years in a row. There's no appetite to raise taxes, so I think staff has done a good job to bring us a pretty reasonable budget. Hazen, is that all you had prepared for this evening? And then we're going to do line item, maybe their next meeting?
Yeah, so typically the board has not gone through the line items. I mean, in 17 years I've been here, you guys always have that right. We don't want to make it sound like we don't, or you don't, but you know, any kind of discussion or any kind of deep dives in areas that you guys want to, or if there's specific items, that's fine too. We do not go line item. We haven't at least gone line item by line item. That would take a long time.
I guess if there's a concern for me, and I don't know how we could rearrange things, but I would like to see our paving schedule try to be a little more aggressive. And I don't know if that's possible, but I sure don't want to slip. I've made the comment ever since I've been an elected official with lots of other folks that are on this board now about, seems we just keep kicking this can down the road, and at some point there's going to be a board that's like, holy cow, we have to spend $3 or $4 million to bring our streets back up to where they need to be. So I'd really like to see us, and maybe this is that odd year where we've had this ridiculous circumstance thrown upon us, but certainly by next year, I hope we can get a lot more aggressive and keep up with our paving. Comment I have.
I would say this budget is not a good long-term budget. When we show you guys the CIP, we've stripped out, it's too strong of a word, but we've reduced the amount of money in the CIP coming from general fund in order to kind of make all this work. And I do think in next year's budget, I fully expect the economy to be a much better place than it is now, to talk about, okay, what do you guys want to do long-term from the town? And I just think a 28-cent tax for a full-service community, I think a comparable community in the Wake County area is probably at least 4.40, maybe 45 cents. If we had 10 cents more, you're talking $3 million in the budget year in, year out. What does that mean? What's that for paving? What's that for more firefighters? What's that for a third station that Reverend Whitley was referring to? But I do think, I guess, to breathe deep and think that's where we're headed over time is prudent, kind of in these, as a part of 70 or 50-year decisions that we're charged with making. I think 28 cents is artificially low.
I concur.
It's also why a lot of people live here, because it's not 40 cents or 50 cents, right?
True that.